God of War was a very, very good game. It was one of the best games to come out in a long time for the PlayStation 4, and one of the best games to come out in some time for any system for that matter. Join me as we take a look at the art of one of the best games of this generation. The art of God of War. Written by Evan Shamoun, and the foreword is by Cory Barlog. The table of contents. Foreword on page 6. Introduction on page 8. Chapter 1. Reproduction on page 11. Chapter 2. First playable on page 47. Chapter 3. Opening up the world on page 71. Chapter 4. Production on page 125. Here is the foreword by Cory Barlog, who is the creative director, Santa Monica Studio. Video games are art. By that, I mean they are both individual artistic statements, as well as a medium reliant on the use of visuals for storytelling. Sure, there are text-based games here and there, but for the most part, the games we consume today are highly visual. Because of this, the visuals of your game are usually the first impression a prospective player has. A giant welcome mat, if you will, that beckons every player into this world you have worked so hard to create, and inviting them to take part in the experience you have worked so hard to craft. When you have the right people, artists who possess an almost magical ability to transform words and thoughts into tangible visual realities that feel both fantastic and real, then achieving that goal is so much easier. It is not easy by any stretch, but the circuitous, winding path of game development is slightly more illuminated thanks to their talents. Making this game has been one of the most difficult, most personal development experiences of my career. Bringing the worlds and characters to life with the artist whose work fills the pages of this book has been incredibly rewarding and has changed me as a director for the better. I think the journey we take as a team when making a game is almost as interesting as the game itself. There are seemingly impossible mountains to climb, monster schedules to slay, delicate juggling of family and work lives, passionate arguments, great victories, and crushing defeats. But through all of this, it is the steady stream of stunning imagery created by all the artists on this team that inspires and drives the rest of us to work into the night, bringing this world to life, to make this world tangible, fantastic, and real. So to all of you for whom we made this game, welcome. The artist of this photo, Vance Kovacs, and as well as this one right here. Introduction. Back when the idea for a new God of War title was first batted around in early 2013, a small incubation team inside Sony's Santa Monica studio was tasked with rebooting the studio's seminal franchise. Early on, creative director Corey Barlog was brought on to help a group of roughly a dozen developers bring the game to life. Having served as a lead animator on the original God of War and game director on God of War 2 and parts of God of War 3, Barlog was intimately familiar with the source material. The project quickly began to reflect the personal lives of its creators. Barlog and other developers on the nascent team had recently had children, and conversations began around the notion of Kratos becoming a father and what drama such a scenario might entail. Where Kratos had previously been something of a one-note protagonist, the team came to recognize how his entrance into fatherhood might serve as an organic way to add more emotional depth to his character. It also represented an opportunity for Barlog to employ the faithful adage of write what you know, extrapolating his own recent experience of becoming a dad and exploring how such an experience might intersect with Kratos' own worldview. Barlog tasked himself and two of the writers on the project to write short stories that would help define the tone of the world for the new game. Barlog's own story revolved around the father and son going hunting. One writer worked on the first appearance of a major Norse god, and the other writer wrote a story about the son being afraid of the water in the process of learning to swim. The goal was to establish how the world felt, and to then use that as a springboard for the rest of the project. Indeed, while Kratos had technically been a father in previous titles, he was always trying to escape from that role. The driving force behind his motivational shift in the new God of War is the passing of the child's mother, which takes place just prior to the start of the adventure. Through this event, Kratos is finally forced to fully embrace fatherhood, which brings with it a level of intimacy that spreads across everything. Writ large, the environment and how it's depicted on screen, to the camera, the relationships, the weapons, even the enemies and how the player fights them. In contrast to the more global perspective of God of War titles past, everything in the new game became more up close and familiar. Another formative change to the new title comes in the form of the world itself, which eschews the franchise's primary inspiration of Greek mythology in favor of something more diverse and enigmatic. Because the Greeks were so successful in terms of their architecture and dress on the culture, its designs pervade much of the contemporary Western culture. To this day, you can find examples of Greco-Roman architecture everywhere, in the US Capitol, for instance. When the team found itself gravitating to Norse mythology for the new game, it quickly became clear that this road was one far less traveled. The team's focus on pre-Viking culture, when it was believed that the gods roamed all the realms in Midgard, simply didn't have much by way of precedent, which meant producing source material entailed a rather deep dive into the creative minds of the artists. Norse culture is very poorly documented, so when the artists would dig for reference, they found relatively little to work with. This meant finding unique, creative angles from which to explore this very small pool of images. For instance, a single small jewelry box might need to serve as inspiration for an entire level in the game. It was something that the team hadn't necessarily had to do on previous projects when given realms of reference from which to work. An artist isn't forced to think in this way. It became one of the great challenges of this project to examine reference essentially and treat it in a very different way. The dearth of reference material meant that the team found itself drawing inspiration from other sources such as Celtic ruins and Indian temples to expand beyond the iconic longhouse and horned helmet to craft its world. One felt that unique and fresh, yet still grounded enough to be believable. As a result, the team was constantly flexing the creative muscles to bring these details to the surface, infusing the game with a constant stream of fresh new ideas. This is but one of the many challenges the team faced in bringing this new iteration of God of War to life. This book is designed to take readers on a chronological journey through the completion of the game as it happened. Creating God of War was an evolving process from idea to final concepts, and we're sharing as much as possible to illustrate what that process looked like from the inside, including the stuff that ultimately didn't make the final cut. As we'll explore in the coming pages, the creative process, especially for a venerated franchise looking to reinvent itself, can be a long and winding road. Chapter 1, Reproduction. The artist was Jose Cabrera for this photo of Kratos. From the very start of development, the team knew it wanted to take the new God of War game in a different visual direction. The old God of War art direction came to be described as heavy metal magazine meets Greek mythology, and that had really given us something unique for a long time, said Doug Berliner. The team often looked back at the style of the early games as the franchise's comic period. Big, mean, and over the top. What would happen, they wondered, if the approach became more cinematic and a bit more gritty, but still maintain those same ideas. With those kinds of conversations happening, the team had to figure out just how grounded they wanted the new game to be. We knew we wanted to lean a lot more on the historical detail, but we also wanted to make a world that was clearly pre-Viking, said Berliner. This was before man had really settled, and when gods, giants, and monsters roamed the land, the period when the myth was really being made. Of course, one of the most involved character designs for God of War was the new look of Kratos. Getting this character right meant a lot to the team, all of whom wanted to strike a balance of retaining the iconic elements of his design, while bringing fresh ideas from the Norse world to the table also. People have expectations for what he's supposed to look like, said lead character artist Rafael Grasati. It was kinda hard to push people to like a completely new design, but once we started just enhancing what was there before, it was a little easier to get people on board. These are early exploration of Kratos. The artists are Dila Longfish and Jose Cabrera. Jose Cabrera. When the team asked Spanish concept artist Jose Cabrera to design some Nomads for them, they expected to get some guy standing on a grey background, perhaps with a bit of snow on the ground. What they got, however, was an evocative image of the Nomads skinning a troll. The image was so compelling that the 3D artist started recreating it, and it eventually ended up in the 2016 God of War E3 trailer. I think Jose had a sensibility for this type of work, said senior concept artist Mark Castanon. This game is much more rough and realistic than the original God of War game, and I think Jose brought a very analytical approach in the lighting, the amount of detail, and the color palette he used in a lot of his paintings. So Jose Cabrera, this is this one, and this one. It's a continuation. And then Cliff Childs has these two on the bottom. At the very start of any project, we often try to create a handful of key images or references that the team can rally behind. Most of the time, it takes a number of paintings to cobble together something that gets close to the mood, and even that can often evolve over time. Sometimes, however, you get lucky and nail it on the first shot. Such was the case when these paintings and those on the following spread started coming in from concept artist Jose Cabrera. We collectively all picked our jaws up off the floor and said, "That's the game. This is the direction we should go in. and it never really changed, said Luke Berliner. Jose Cabrera does all of these paintings, as you see. From the start, the team knew that the game's Hellfire level was going to be lit solely from the Temple of Light at the center of that level. But what would a forest look like if it had grown for thousands of years in those lighting conditions? The team imagined that the trees would bend and twist toward the light, each flower and leaf stretching toward the temple. The shadows, therefore, would never see light, creating a life or death contrast that the team explored throughout the level. Section Studios did these, and Luke Berliner up here, and Cliff Childs is down here. And the team was exploring the look of characters in the game. Concept artist Yefim Klinkerman created these evocative concepts for what the Dead of Helheim might look like, some of which made it into the final game. This is Yefim Klinkerman. And then over here in the mythology, the dead journey over the River of Knives as they make their way into Helheim proper. When the team looked at glacial flows and melts, they noticed that they often look like knives, with harsh, scattered, serrated edges. These illustrations also speak to a city whose sole purpose was to arm an undead army and build the massive ship of the dead. These are the endless wastelands of Helheim and Jungle Park. And Luke Berliner did these ones. Early on, the team played quite a bit with abstract, minimalist architecture, trying to find a balance between organic and intentional design. Many of the large stone temples and ruins you see in the game were built by the giants who had long left Midgard. We imagine their building was very much opportunistic, into the sides of mountains or where there was a massive stone already waiting to be shaped, said lead environment artist John Balmalurchuk. It was interesting, because starting out there was this desire to be ultra-millennial. Minimalism was the thing, said Luke Berliner, who remembers being in the early meetings where the team didn't even want any metal on the characters. It was a really long road of exploring. Early on, I think it was much more gritty and real and super dark. Indeed, the initial pitch for the game was, what if mythology was a little bit more real? What if gods would appear in the form, for instance, a shadow in the woods running past the player, or other manifestations that were smaller in scale than what we're used to? Jungle Park did these ones. Cliff Childs did the middle one. Jungle Park did this one and this one. Mood, the artist of Mood, did these, and Cliff Childs as well. Helheim represented an interesting architectural mystery for the team to crack. Creative director Corey Barlog was adamant about it feeling colder than gold. As such, the team played quite a bit with mist and wind, trying to bring a somber feeling to a place where all prior travelers had met inglorious deaths. Here we can see explorations of the Bridge of the Damned, surveyed by Mogdit as they filed in. Cliff Childs and Jungle Park. This is a good picture. I like this one. Jose Cabrera, this is the city of the stone mason. While the majority of work created these days is primarily done digitally, it is not the only avenue artists have to explore character designs. Here are a couple of maquette created by Rafael Grassati for Kratos and Atreus early on in the project. Being able to see a character helps anyone not on the art team understand how a design is intended to be fully resolved. There is a unique connection people get from actually being able to touch and hold a character maquette in their hands, said the character artist Raphael Grasati. Even if the design details are still being worked out, people are able to get a full sense of the character. The sculptor was Raphael Grasati, and the photographer was James Rulison. While Atreus is Kratos' son, he's unlike his father in some ways. Atreus still has an innocent and wondrous view of the world and its mythology, and the team wanted to preserve that feeling throughout his design. I tried to retain that in these early concepts, exploring Atreus, said lead concept artist Tila Longfish. While some may have expected Kratos' son to be muscular and strong, he was intentionally designed to feel more modest. Corey's strongest point, and the one thing that ties everything together, is that once you understand wonderment, and you understand how that ties in with everything else, it becomes the backbone of everything, said Luke Berliner. That wonderment from the kid's perspective is the biggest difference from this game and the rest of the God of War franchise. Exploring Atreus, Taylor Longfish. Jose Cabrera did these ones, and Taylor Longfish did these ones. And this one was the closest that came to the final. But the hair color is brown, not blonde, like in this one right here. The Paradise of Jotunheim was always intended to be the end goal of the game. The team thought early on that all the nomads and travelers that Kratos meets on his journey would be searching for a way to access it themselves too. That idea was scrapped, but the notion remained that Jotunheim is a land of bounty, with glittering fields as far as the eye can see. Here are early concepts for the Jotunheim levels. Look for something with a darker tone. The artist thought it would be interesting to populate the land with misshapen metal trees, sprouting fire. Jotunheim represents a realm with a dry desert feel, and the final version stayed pretty close to the colors shown in these pieces. As you can see, this is the glittering fields of Jotunheim. Chung-Ho Park was the artist for this one. Cliff Childs, and then Chung-Ho Park and Luke Berliner. I apologize if you hear that noise, it's my neighbor. He is 6 o'clock at night here and this guy just, I don't know what he's doing, mowing the lawn. I have no idea, so I apologize in advance. This is a Midgard 3D look development from Dan McKim, Kevin Quinn, Eric Jacobson, and Aaron Contreras, and Stephanie Gaudet, and Isabel LeMay. And here, Nate Stevens, John Palmarchuk, Sukru Gilman, and Paul Koda. This is Ogre Exploration. We have Raphael Grasati and Axel Grossman and Jungle Park. And then over here, the Ogre was an early design created by Jose Cabrera, exploring a creature that's unique to Norse mythology. Like many of the creatures in our game, we wanted to push the fantastic, while at the same time achieving believability with their designs, says lead concept artist Tila Longfish. Here we go, we got Raphael Grasati and Jose Cabrera right here. With dragons being such a well-known part of Norse mythology, these were among some of the earliest creatures the team explored. Getting a feeling for their scale and how their environment might influence them was essential, along with their unique methods of flight. Exploring a new look for dragons, you have Taylor Longfish and Jose Cabrera, and Mark Castanon right down here. One day, sharing development, every team member arrived at work to find a book on each of their desks. The team had worked very hard to give everyone a guide for how to start thinking about the project, to illustrate was important to them, what the mode of the game was meant to be, and how they wanted to play. This creative Bible had the net result of aligning everyone on the team, and they spent the day reading it and talking about what each would need to support it. In the back of that book was a comic created by Joe Kennedy, which was perhaps the new God of War's most representative piece at the time. Indeed, the role of Kratos' son in the game was one of the biggest unknowns for the team, and these strips definitively helped sell it. Some of the other paintings from that book are sprinkled throughout this chapter as well. So you got Jose Cabrera and Joe Kennedy. Chapter 2. First playable. Taylor Longfish. Did the drawing. First playable. Sometime around the middle of pre-production, creative director Corey Barlog decided to bring a number of the team's experiments together into a first playable. There were several internal teams wrestling with ideas for what the game should look and play like, and Barlog wanted to see how the disparate pieces of the puzzle fit together. There was no level design at this point, so the team started creating little maps to help find the art goals for the demo. The focus was on two key aspects: to show the relationship between Kratos and his son as he brought him to hunt, and to show the new camera and basic combat with a grunt type enemy, proving out the new weapon. From the start, there was a strong emotional element to the hunt. Watching Atreus kill the deer and Kratos' ensuing reaction was something the team kept coming back to. At first, we wanted to do something big and epic, but we quickly realized that getting Kratos into a small emotional moment was something much more difficult to pull off than we thought, said lead concept artist Taylor Longfish. The team kept refining this concept until getting it to work, and ultimately the strength of that moment ended up leading to the E3 2016 demo. Early on, we made a forest area, and once we were done making it, we looked at it and said it was apparent that it looked like the Sierra Nevada mountain range, not like a Norse forest, said lead environment artist Nate Steffens. The team had done plenty of research, but was drawing from muscle memory. One of the cool guys on our team, Dino Felajanki, I pronounced it incorrect probably, but he's from Sweden, and he was looking at the trees like how those are American trees, Stephen continued. Even when you looked up at the sky, the texture of the clouds just looked like a California sky, not a North sky, which is much higher up in the hemisphere, where you get a lot of blues and pinks and low light angles. So for a while, the feedback was that the game looked like sunny California, and not enough like a cold, wet Norse environment. Meat card artists were Stefan Gaudet, Lucas Sparks, Nate Stevens, Dan McKim, and Cliff Childs. One of the key questions that needed answering from a visual development perspective was, how do you make a forest feel like it belongs in a God of War game? The team started playing with the idea that maybe the land masses the player was on were, in fact, giant creatures or temples that had been scattered around. Enough fantasy that when the player didn't see anything other than trees, they still felt like they were in a special place. This is the first playable exploration, and the artists were Luke Berliner and Cliff Childs. And here we have Lucas Sparks, Isabelle LeMay, Stephanie Godet, Nate Stevens, Cliff Childs, and John Wilborg. And then here it shows the different weather. You start in daybreak, then you go to snowfall, and then when you get here, you're in a blizzard. At this time, a significant amount of effort was committed to exploring what a realistic version of Kratos might look like. A great deal of collaboration between the 2D and 3D teams took place at this stage. We were playing with the proportions so Kratos would feel older, but still strong, said Rafael Grasati. The initial idea was that Kratos was supposed to be this bear character, and then his son would be smaller like a wolf, said the character artist Rafael Grasati. So there was this clear contrast between the bear and the wolf. We started putting fur on Kratos and then on his son, and playing with the color of that fur to help bump the contrast. Throughout the development, we always came back to the original bear and wolf notion. These are collaborative 2D and 3D developments on Kratos, and Rafael Grasati and Dila Longfish did those, and Rafael Grasati did this. And here he kind of looks like Zeus did in God of War 3. But this is what he ended up looking like at the end. Rafael Grasati sculpted these clay troll maquettes as the team explored the creature's design. These pieces serve as a prime example of the collaborative relationship that exists within the art department, since Taylor Longfish initiated the process with penciled sketches, which Grasati then used as inspiration for his sculpture. He captured a wonderful candid pose with the troll standing triumphant after a hunt, not only hinting at the character's personality, but using the corpse of the bear to communicate the size and danger of the trolls within the world. Hand-sculpted troll maquette. Rafael Grasati was the sculptor, James Rosen was the photographer, and Cliff Childs did this drawing. Here we see the design of Atreus finally coming into focus. Kratos is not of this world, but Atreus is, and the team wanted his costume to reflect this. Atreus also carries mementos from both his mother and father at all times. The yellow scarf is from his mother, a color which represents her character in the game, while the red sash around his waist is the same one Kratos wore in the previous God of War games. One of the final elements that helped the team round out this design was the addition of the actor Sonny Suchik, who portrays Atreus in the game. The initial idea was that Atreus would be a more sickly character, said Rafael Grasati. Early on we had designs where his hair had fallen out. He still has a bunch of scars on his face to show what he's been through in his childhood. Narrowing in on the design of Atreus, artists were Rafael Grasati and Taylor Longfish. He ends up looking like this, but in the game he has darker hair and more of it. Here we see more costume explorations for Atreus. An important consideration in video games is how the player sees the character. Since the game uses a third-person over-the-shoulder camera, making sure the back of the character is just as visually pleasing as the front is of crucial importance. The sun was easier to design than Kratos because we could just do something from scratch, said Rafael Grasati. There was a lot of research into historical references, and then we started playing with costumes and playing with simple shapes, and we had something unique with just a basic silhouette. working out Atreus' costume details with Daily Longfish. Early on, the Nomads were designed as very grounded characters that were meant to contrast the more fantastic elements of the game. Their clothing and design were influenced by the materials the team imagined they would find in their surroundings. As with many designs, however, these characters would evolve over the course of the project. To ensure that they read well in the game, the team reduced designs to simple graphic shapes to see if their clarity held up at a very low level of detail. Humans of the world, nomad exploration, Daily Longfish. And then here, development renders of Nomads. Artists were Raphael Crissati and Daily Longfish. Here we have Finding Midgard, Cliff Childs, and Dan McKim, Marios Wiechik, Nate Steffens, and Luke Berliner. Concept artist Jumbo Park helped nail down the aesthetic for God of War's statues with this wolf statue design. The team wanted to see what it would look like if they went for a style that was more planar and emotional, rather than anatomically accurate. Coming from the Greek games, we thought this would mark a strong departure, said lead concept artist Luke Berliner. We also wanted to pull from the rich design work found in Viking artifacts. Here you have Mysteries of Midgard, Jungle Park, and Cliff Childs, and Luke Berliner, and The Door in the Mountain, Luke Berliner. These are concepts for a creature called the Wolver, an aggressive creature that can stand like a man or run on all four legs like a wolf, a kind of Norse werewolf, and further explorations of Norse creatures from Daily Longfish. And Yefim Kligerman has the Wolver exploration. Almost as important as the game's dual heroes is Kratos' new weapon, his Leviathan axe. With the Blades of Chaos from the previous game serving as such an iconic part of Kratos' character, the challenge was to create a new weapon that had the same presence and appeal. The team wanted a weapon that was believable and clearly from this new world, but one that also stood out as special and something fantastic. And somewhat fantastic. And like the game's heroes, the axe itself has a history that's revealed throughout the game. Forging Kratos' new weapons, Jose Cabrera, Yefim Kligerman, and Vance Kovacs and Jose Cabrera. Here we have Mark Castanon. And here, Chapter 3, Opening Up the World. As the development team wrapped up its first God of War playable, the dust was beginning to settle on the narrative side. Story details were being locked down, and it was time to dig into the main game. 2 levels became initial points of focus. The mountain, a large vertical cavernous dungeon with a dragon, and Hellfire, the realm of the Elves. With a great deal of effort and much iteration, Hellfire represented the first time the team started to nail down what another realm would look and feel like. Things were also ramping up on the visual development side, as that team worked to support the main team's new goals, while simultaneously continuing to explore the creatures, characters, and locations they wanted to include in the game. High vision work is extremely important to the concept artists, even if a given piece of work isn't used directly in the game. It often helps to inspire level designs and provides a preview of the aesthetic choices the artists intend to make. This means that when the design for a given team, a given item is ready, the subsequent work can be executed much faster. Early on, we wanted a furious enemy for our heroes, ferocious enemy for our heroes heroes to encounter on their journey. So we explored multiple types of undead creatures, said lead concept artist Tila Longfish. We wanted to avoid the standard zombie characters, and looking to Norse mythology, the Dragon was a creature that really stood out and provided us a great deal of inspiration. Resurrected warriors, you got Yevin Kligerman and Tila Longfish. As per their love, the Dragger are restless spirits who, unwilling to die, return to their fallen bodies and reanimate them. As per their lore, by the way, not their love, I apologize. Their unnatural, continued rebirth has caused a fracturing of what remains of their physical forms. Here we see some explorations of how the team wanted to visually represent those ideas in their design. Since a Dragger is no longer a living being, the powerful will of its tortured soul is the only force holding it together and animating its physical form. The team discussed how recognizable these creatures should be, even as having once been human, after enduring an unknowable period of severe physical decay. Each concept artist took their own pass at this character, and that collaboration helped to arrive at the Dogger's grisly final form. Further development, exploring the look of the Dragger. Taylor Longfish and Vance Kovacs. The Dragger character is an enemy the player encounters in every realm of the game, so a lot of time was spent on exploring the different forms this character could take. Alongside their physical attacks, concepts for their mythical attack mechanics and effects were also explored. Stephen Oakley did this one. And here, it was imagined the Dragger's violent rebirth not only caused their bodies to break and fraction, but that the resulting reaction would cause hot magma or energy to be released from within, creating an additional supernatural effect to these characters. It's a constant goal to create a design that adds visual drama to a character that simultaneously makes gameplay more dynamic, adding a mythical element to the Dragger, Tila Longfish. These concepts were used for early inspiration of various side content quest areas, said John Palmerchuk. We eventually used the crystal themes in the Haldra Mines quest to tie the mining of materials back to the Haldra brothers. The top image became the architectural base shell for the Odin's Vault Challenge arenas that feature the optional Valkyrie bosses in the game. Depths of Midgard, Paul Coda, Melissa Smith, Raul Apaccio, Cliff Childs, and Section Studios. Mood and Cliff Childs over here. Once the God of War team finished work on the first playable and parts of Midgard had been established, the artist dove into exploring more of the world and attempted to find more of the mythology. The team also needed to find out what section of the game to crack into next, and Hellfire stood out as a prime target. Creative director Corey Barlog wanted the Lydells to appear angelic and perfect, and their world needed to reflect that. I remember we sat in a room for like a month, off and on, talking about what the pillars of the art direction would be, Luke Berliner recalled. Finally, what ended up kind of gelling for the environment artists, leads, and character art leads, and really all of us, were three pillars: mythical realism, Norse mythology, and borrowing from the practical 80s pre-digital color film aesthetic. Reaching for the light in the land of the Lydells, Luke Berliner and Cliff Childs. Luke Berliner and Cliff Childs is right here. Here we see just a drop in the bucket of the various temple designs the team tried. One idea we had around Hellfire was that the souls collected would be deposited at the base of the lake around the temple, said the concept artist Luke Berliner. These souls would be released through the temple to each realm as humans were born. When the temple was taken over by the Dark Elves, there would be more stillbirths happening as the souls could not leave the lake. Studies of the Temple of Hellfire, you have Section Studios in McBoomerang. Experimenting with visual expressions of light and life, the team stumbled onto the theme of the circle. Creative director Cory Barlog wanted this temple to symbolize life and rebirth. In this shape, a simple concept with a more powerful and iconic look than anything they had tried before it ended up resonating with them. Luke Berliner, Section Studios, and Eric Jacobson. The interior of the Elfheim Temple, where the dusk veil hangs invasively over the light of Elfheim. We talked about the light of Elfheim as if it had always been there, said Berliner. The temple around it was built by the Light Elves to celebrate it, and over the years the Dark Elves and Light Elves fought over the light. The Dark Elves would feed off it like a drug. Entering the dusk veil, Section Studios up here, and Luke Berliner over here. Because so much of the world was made from art materials like stone and wood, the team wanted to bring a softer angelic quality to the temple. Fabric became an early idea to which they became attached, since it can have an implied rigidity when stretched over a structure, but it can also be allowed to fall and soften on its own. Elfheim's Temple of Light, Section Studios, and Luke Berliner. The Dark Elves and Light Elves are such an interesting set of characters to design, and early in development we knew we wanted to see them in the game, said Dela Longfish. While they are a more elevated race than man, they are still less than gods, occupying a unique middle ground in Norse mythology. We wanted something more than the classic elf design, and here we can see the first concepts of the Dark Elves. Early concept designs for the Dark Elves, we have Yefim Klickerman and Dela Longfish over here. The Light Elves were designed to feel angelic and monk-like, and while at first glance their appearance is different than that of the Dark Elves, they have the same body markings, and their own horns are made to look like headpieces. Light Elf concepts from Dela Longfish. Tyr's Temple was an opportunity for the team to implement some of the grand architecture for which God of War is known, but these clearly early sketches were far too decayed and humble for the majestic scale that Cory Barlog wanted to convey, since Tyr was intended to be portrayed as an ostentatious egomaniac. The team got very excited once they discovered the idea of the compass for the realms. Unearthing Tyr's Temple, Cliff Childs and Luke Berliner. Cliff Childs and Luke Berliner. Many of the early designs for the trench were far too simple, but once the area began to develop a more serpentine aesthetic, it rapidly established the tone for the space moving forward. Unfortunately, it was much more difficult to produce a modular serpentine design, but the environment artist still brought the location to life in fantastic fashion. The Elfheim's Trench, Section Studios. The storytelling goal of this location was to explain how the souls are deposited in the lake. Inspired by Norse weavings, the team crafted a design that tells the story of how a creature moved toward the temple as the souls went forward to seek new life in the other realms. Section Studios, Yefim Klickerman and Mark Castanon. Here you have Riches of Midgard from Section Studios. These are all the treasure chests you open in the game. While many might overlook small props, the God of War team places a great deal of effort in designing chests and other interactive elements. It's a consistently seen asset that the player will constantly use, and the designers require that it be easy to find and gratifying to interact with throughout the entire game. Jim, Kim, and Mood are the artists here. Mood. Originally, the Lake of Nine was going to be the hub of God of War, a grand temple built by Tyr, allowing the gods to travel between the realms. The concept was that the other gods hated Tyr, whom they perceived as extravagant, and that his temple was far too flashy. Cory wanted the temple to almost be a temple to Tyr himself, Luke Berliner recalled. He always wanted the temple to be flooded, proposing that the world serpent had come in and destroyed the temple, flooding the entire area. The early designs the team created, however, were never quite ostentatious enough, but we finally hit on something when we proposed a design that acted as a compass, pointing at each realm the player would travel to, said Berliner. This ended up being translated by the level designers into a rotating bridge that pointed at the realm the player was to travel to. Luke Berliner and Clifford Childs. For the Revenant designs, we wanted to nail down a look that conjured up the imagery of the classic Revenant, but also pushed and emphasized the unsettling aspect of the character recalled Taylor Longfish. The team ultimately decided to go with a stretched, longer neck, as well as decrepit, dangling legs, reflective eyes, and a face shrouded by hair with horns growing out of her head. We think these additions convey the strangeness of this character, and more importantly, the dangerous nature of our hero's world, exploring the many forms of the Revenant from Taylor Longfish. Like many early concepts, we explore the what-if of a character. By covering a wide range of ideas, this allows the director to pick what most fits their idea, and in some cases can help expand on those ideas. These early Revenant concepts explored ideas like what if she sat perched high above the ground, or in contrast was rooted to the ground itself. Others explored the ideas of her magic being based on sound, emanating from a drum of sorts. While none of these are part of the final design, they were all necessary steps to help the team arrive there. Again, Taylor Longfish. Revenant design comes to fruition from Yefim Klingerman. Yefim Klingerman as well over here. As Kratos and Atreus began their journey, the team needed to create a nice introduction into the world for the player, a taste of the dangers embedded in this world. Our first stab at this was really much more somber. We wanted to start the journey off with a statement that this won't be fun or safe, but will be an adventure, said Luke Berliner. But we ended up making it much more optimistic after a lot of people played it and just felt depressed. This level was very much inspired by the sulfur pits the team visited in Iceland early in development. Just looking at these paintings reminds us of how bad they smelled, said Berliner. Dangers of the World from Yefim Klingerman and Mood. And here we have Mark Castanon and Mood. As development on God of War moved along, one key tactic the team employed was to assign specific colors to particular races and gods in its world. Yellow became the color for Atreus' mother, as well as the giants, while orange represented the Witch of the Woods. Witch of the Woods home, from Mood and Anis Naim. Witch of the Woods became a pivotal character in the DNA of the game. Cory Barlog wanted her to live in a magical woods, so it made sense to give her a more vivid forest in which to live. As the player moves toward her home, the leaves start to turn to a blood orange color, and things begin to feel much more magical. Stephen Oakley did these ones. Around this point, the game leads got really excited about the Witch of the Woods house being inside the belly of a giant turtle. I think that was like a pivotal moment where it started to go more into this 80s fantasy movie, like Conan, or The Dark Crystal, or Red. Sonia, said Luke Berliner. Stephen Oakley did this drawing. And then here, it was like, okay, this can go bad very easily, recalled Taylor Longfish. At this point, concept artist Stephen Oakley had come on board, and this was his first task, to create a turtle with a house on it that still felt believable. It was a lot of fun trying to figure out how to make the Witch of the Woods house creature work and still look cool, Oakley remembered. Definitely trying to keep it within the realm of the real, but you know, it's a giant turtle. Oakley found himself going back into the 80s and 90s for inspiration. There's a lot of character in epic creature films like The Never-Ending Story, a lot of personality that definitely helped inform this creature, he said. It originally started as something that you might be scared of, but then further down the line, we were taking that kind of inspiration and turning her into this powerful but still friendly being. Berliner wasn't fully sold on the idea at the time, feeling that it was at odds with the more realistic tone for which the game had been striving. Like having Falcor in the road, this soon generated a great deal of conversation regarding the game's established art direction and whether or not they were taking full technology. With a slight shift in the wind, we incorporated a deeper sense of magic. Thinking about the wonder and excitement Atreus might be feeling on this journey, said Berliner. That's when things really started coming together. Designing a friendly creature, Stephen Oakley and Raphael Cassetti and Glauco Longhi. At this point, we'd worked on Helheim on and off for a long time, and nothing was really sticking. We called Luke Berliner. The team was starting to get frustrated. Corey Barlog didn't think anything looked cold enough, and many of the artists didn't feel that they'd nailed down an interesting architecture for the level. As the story started to take shape for this area, a lot of the visual development material was cut. After sitting down for a bit looking through old sketches, however, the team uncovered some interesting details. They loved the fractal nature of things, and the hand shear-cut angles, the hard shear-cut angles. At this point, the team was also ramping up into full production and were stretched thin on the concept side, so they brought in Ines Naim to help define this area with some fresh eyes. Reinventing Helheim, Luke Berliner and Ines Naim. Ines Naim and Luke Berliner. The team continued playing with the golden roof over the Bridge of the Damned, described in the mythology alongside the River of Knives. They imagined these could be serrated glacial flows, moving below the bridge, and Annis realized he could employ the monolithic towers that Chris Sutton had loved so much in the beginning of the project. On his Naim again, Bridge of the Damned, Annis had found reference images of mortaring stones with holes carved through them that lined up so one could look down the length of them, and brought this idea to Helheim in the shape of these massive towers. This would give the team an interesting shape to suspend the Bridge of the Damned, and through which the player could fly during their escape. Again, Anis Naim did these ones. The mountain presented an opportunity for the team to leave what they knew of the forest behind, and enter into a realm of wild architecture and old abandoned hazards. Here we can peek inside the mountain that the player has been working toward throughout the game for so long. The lore has it that the interior was hollowed out by the giants and built to guard the back door to Jotunheim, which lies at the top of the mountain. Creative director Corey Barlog had the idea fairly early on in the game to have a black, impassable smoke safeguarding the entrance to the mountain. Early on, the team wasn't sure what form this should take, and they even talked about smoke that clung to players like hands and looks more sinister than what ended up in the final game. Entering the mountain from Luke Berliner and Vance Kovacs and Jose Cabrera, with a face in the mountain. Here we see the work of senior concept artist Mark Castanon as he was trying to find the shapes for the architecture through the mountain. Because this was all crafted by the giants, we wanted to show off their skills as master stone craftsmen, said Luke Berliner. One thing we kept talking about was the scale of the giants. How can we make a level that feels big, but also doesn't make you feel like it's just Jack and the Beanstalk? Chris Sutton kept pointing out that in the mythology, the giants were not all big, and that some were able to change their size. This became the reality of the game, as well as the player encounters dead giants of all sizes and shapes. From Mark Castanon, the architecture of the giants. Mark Castanon, Raul Abracio, Marius Weish, and Paul Coda. The lower section of the mountain was more of a mine with an old abandoned signs of industry throughout the area. On the opposite page, we also see the corpses of the many dead warriors and those seeking unsuccessfully to summit the mountain, which extend all the way up its face. Base of the chimney from Mark Castanon. And Mood right here. Like other architectural areas of Midgard itself, the inspiration for the architecture in the mountain came from various ancient locations where dwellings were entirely carved out of cliff faces or giant rocks. In this area, you could hopefully get some fantastic organic architectural areas blending into the greater rock that had moments of refinement and culture. Since the mountain was essentially a giant mine, we wanted to couple that with ancient mining technology that had strong structural integrity but also felt old and distressed. Our goal was to hopefully create a space that felt like the giants had a substantial footprint here, and that at one point in time was very alive and industrial, while also looking like time had passed and environmental effects had taken their tolls at Marcastanon. Middle Chimney Explorations, Melissa Smith, Paul Coda, Raul Abracio, Mark Castanon, and Mood. The Travelers are the strongest non-mythical enemies the player encounters. These powerful warriors travel the land, gaining both physical and magical knowledge to aid them in combat. The Travelers were designed to be tank-like. With that in mind, Jose designed them using small metal pieces, which are held together with interwoven leather straps to create the massive armor they wear and give it a unique Norse feel. Only when their armor had been knocked off, they are vulnerable. Traveler Explorations, Yefim Klickerman, and Jose Cabrera. Early on in the project, Mood had created a painting of a fallen giant. With the landscape having grown up around its body, the team quickly grew attached to the idea of this gargantuan corpse, going so far as to attempt placing it into the vista of the first playable demo. Creative director Corey Barlock developed the story of this giant stone mason, Thammer, and his attempts to raise stone fortifications, protecting Jotunheim from the Thor prior to the giant's demise. This level in the game is nicknamed Stone Mason, and its lore stated that when Thor killed Thammer, the giant fell into a village in its adjacent lake. With his last breath, Thammer froze the surrounding area, locking the tip of his chisel deep into the ice. The Stone Mason, Jose Cabrera, Lucas Sparks, and Brandon Shaw. And Lucas Sparks, Isabella May, and Brandon Shaw. You play this level towards the end of the game,